we're going straight to chapter 4, okay? Chapter 4. I really would like to move faster than I'm doing. And then when we get where we're pretty well through the grand survey, then we can spend some time talking about major issues that that'd be well worth our developing. Here's chapter 4, yes, of Daniel. The Daniel that Jesus read and loved, all of that. Here's Daniel 4. Nebuchadnezzar, after chapter 3, and the boys in the fire, he has made them big hitters, all right? Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and nourishing in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. This is his second shot. Dreams for the big hitters. Like, you remember Pharaoh back in the days of Joseph? He had a couple of dreams, and the fellows who worked closely to him, a cupbearer and a valet, they had dreams also. That was a very common issue. But if you were a big hitter, if you're a guy who speaks and thousands are affected, coups are always the possibility. All that is going on, and you'd worry about such things. So you would dream a lot of, I would have thought, frightening dreams. I would have suspect Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden and Mr. Johnson in London and the guy, the Politburo in Russia, they would all have these tough times and tough dreams. So this is not a hard thing to understand. And you notice again how what is said in 4 is already said in 2 in a similar fashion. It's Jewish. Very Jewish. But when he's wanting to praise the gods, he would want to use speech that would fit a Jewish way of expressing it. You remember how the gods were sometimes thought to be gods who only work well in the mountains or in the hills, or you could only worship a god right in his own property. That's why Naaman, you remember, the leper who is healed in the work of Elisha, he says, look, I would like to stay here, but I've got to go back. But I want you to know, the only one I'm going to be bowing to from here on in is Yahweh. But since I'm going over the Syrian property and all of that, and I can't worship him there, he thought, I want to take 2 mules burdens worth of soil and take it over there and worship your God on his soil. All of that went on all the time. Yes, chapter 4, verse 5, I saw a dream that made me afraid. Thoughts in my bed, visions of my head troubled me. I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Well, same thing said earlier. Critics say, well, why didn't he get a hold of Daniel in the first place when he knows that Daniel could do it? But Daniel was a politician. He was a big governor. He was put over all kinds of things. And that fella probably wasn't anywhere out of the office. You couldn't find him. That's all there is about it. So he got a hold of anybody he can get a hold of. Verse 7, then 4:7. Then the magicians, astrologers, and Chaldeans. I told you that the word Chaldea is used in various ways. It's ethnic and it's a language, and then it's a kind of specialized group of religious fellows. Magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, soothsayers, they all come in. I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation. But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belshazzar. According to the name of my God, in him is the spirit of the holy God. I told the dream before him, saying, Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know, different phrase, I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you. He's not saying the holy God is in him. He's saying that the spirit of the holy God is in him. And so that is the power. I won't stop to make this point clear, but in a number of places in the Old Testament, a great number of them, the Spirit of God, when it's mentioned, it doesn't mean the Holy Spirit the way you and I think of him as a person. That is really developed fully in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, repeatedly, when we hear, and the Spirit of God did this, that, and the other, it's talking about God acting in power. I needed to say that, and then you can forget it if you wish, all right? Verse 9, chief of the magicians, I know that the Spirit of the Holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you. Explain to me the visions in my dream that I have seen and its interpretation. You remember earlier he said, Daniel, you can do it. Daniel said, no, I can't do it. But there is a God in heaven who can do it. So the Spirit of the Holy God is in you and opens up your mind and all of that kind of thing. Chapter 4, verse 10. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I saw a tree, 10b. I saw a tree in the midst of the earth. Its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Height reached to the heavens. It could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Leaves were lovely, fruit abundant. It was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwell in its branches. And all flesh was fed from it. Here's another claim about his universal dominion. You remember earlier on in 2:37, Daniel said, God has given you over everything. The picture now is him not as a golden head, but as a tree. And so you can see how massive, how powerful, how fruitful, and all of those other words that I can't remember now. Chapter 4, verse 30, wait a minute, sorry. Verse 36. Where am I, Linda?
You were in 10 a minute ago.
I was 4. That's better. Thank you, my dear.
13, Jim, 13.
Where am I now? 4:13. Thank you, everybody. I saw in the visions of my head on the bed, saw a watcher coming down from heaven. A lot of scholars like to talk about who the watchers are, and it's a waste of good time when there's so much else to get on. Yeah, whoever the watchers are, but there's always a council of the gods thought about. God even talks to the gods. The council, let us make man in our image. It's not plural gods. He's seen as speaking with those who sit around his throne and all of that. He does the same thing when he's talking in the days of Micaiah, when he gets Micaiah the prophet. What will we say to Ahab? All I'm saying is that this is not strange language. It's all over the place. The watchers are those who keep an eye on it. They are part of the council that God is seen as having. He doesn't have actually any counselors, but that's how he's painted. In the New Testament and in the Old Testament, we'll see it in chapter 7. In the New Testament, when you see Christ sitting where when Christ is exalted, where does he sit? He sits at this, you can nod if you're, no, he's sitting at God's right hand. God's sitting on a big chair. The English word chair back centuries ago was only used of a throne. And then it became of common speech, anybody sitting on. That's the English word. And so in the Bible, in the New Testament, you see Jesus image, sitting at God's right hand. God's on a big throne, and that's that. Why did they do that? Because they couldn't speak of another world that isn't our world. So how do they speak about God's dominion and his authority and his kingship and all of that? They paint the picture of him the way everybody sees it in the world in which they live. And we do the same thing all the time, and we don't even notice it. Jesus lifts up his eyes and looks upward as if he believed that God was out in outer space. But on the other hand, if you lived in Australia and you looked up, you'd be looking in an opposite direction. Look, all of that stuff is the language that they use. It's this language. It's our language. It's the language of the flesh language. And here, where am I now? One more time. Tell me, help me again.
14.
All right. Okay, the watchers, thank you. The watchers cried aloud and said, chop down the tree, cut off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit, let the beasts get from under it, birds from its branches, nevertheless leave the stump and roots in the earth. Bind with a band of iron and bronze, and the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts. 4:16, on the grass of the earth, let the heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given a heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him. This decision is made by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence is by the word of the holy ones. There's who are the watchers. They're God's counselors. They're the saintly types, the holy people, like seraphim. Seraphim you read about in Isaiah 6. Seraphim, are they really? And cherubim, who are the chariot of God, are these really beings? They're not really beings. They're imaged deals that give us a picture of the dominion of God and all the rest of it. He sits as a king on a seat, and he has people all around him, his counselors with whom he'll speak and do this, that, and the other. Okay, verse 17 again. This decision is by the decree of the watchers, the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of man, gives it to whomsoever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. This fellow is a braggart. He loves what he's done. We're going to read about it in a minute. But he thinks he's all muscles and he's all wisdom and he's all that. And we once more will hear about it in a minute. But notice what all this is for and what is about. That it's the Most High that rules in the kingdom of man, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. He's not saying that God chooses Hitler. He's not saying that God chooses Pol Pot or Vlad the Impaler or any of those guys. He's saying that nobody gets authority without his okaying it, without him allowing it. He is set up. I've said this before. Let me say it and then get rid of it. He sets up all the structures. Romans chapter 13, 1-8, 1 Peter 2, 17 and following. Every soul has to submit itself to the higher powers because there is no power, he said, except that which God has set up. Colossians 1:15 says he has created all the powers. Where did they come from? He created us with all the capacity for creativity, for all the capacity for being wise, working together, seeing how we have to work with one another. All of that he gave humans. If you read the book of Genesis, after Noah, you hear about this person who became great in metallurgy, this fellow who became great in bronze, this fellow who became a great hunter, these people who became teachers and all of that. The development of the human family is mentioned there, but all of the gifts are of God. And when I'm here, I might as well say this. It's a mistake to think that when a person becomes a Christian, that God gives them smarts and wisdom and a good brain and all of that. That's not what happens. God gives people all of these things before they become Christians. And then when they become Christians, they take all of those gifts and they use them for God, the church, for the proclamation of the gospel and all of that. He did not make you smart the day you became a Christian. He already made you smart, developing it. Ooh, see, that becomes important for us because it allows other people who are non-Christians to be smart. They're not always smart, and we're not always smart either. And because we're impure in thought, impure in our ambition and all of that, we take smartness, we take power and all of that, and we corrupt it. And we use the power and the shrewdness and the good about money and administration and all of that, and we do all these kinds of things with them. But those were all given to us of God. And the structures, Romans again 13 and 1 Peter chapter 2, he sets the powers in their place, not by hexing or anything else. He allows the nations to make their own choices. And I'll tell you, Churchill said of Hitler, he hated Hitler. He said if Hitler invaded hell, I would work for the devil. That's just how bad he hated him. But he said Hitler was the creation of a terrible wrong. And he was talking about what the Allies did to Germany just short after the war, the war indemnity that they had to pay. France took the best of land. Everybody did this, that, and the other. And by the time Hitler was coming along, 1 trillion%, well, of course, worse now today, of course, in lots of places. But back in the day, after 1918 and that, when the Munich, this, that, and the other. When Hitler came along, 1 trillion%, those that had a job in Germany, those that had a job, and there were few and far between in the middle of all the riots, those who had a job, they were paid every day. And then things kept getting worse, and they were printing million mark pieces of paper. And you got paid once a day, and then it got worse, and then you got paid twice a day. The wives and the mothers would run to the gate. The guy in the work would give them the money. They'd run. This is all true. They would run to the shop if there was a shop open. And if there was any food there, they would stood in a line and watched the food being priced out of what they had. What went on in Germany? Albert Speer said, "You have no idea how we longed for someone like Hitler." He committed the job, and the first thing he did was, once he got to be chancellor and all of that, he got everybody a job. And he said, hang the rules and regulations of them. And I didn't mean to get into all of this. I'm just saying, I forgot what my point was. Here I go. I'm back in chapter 4, okay? This is terrible, isn't it?
18.
18.
You're in 18.
4:18. Thank you. Here he is. I'm telling you, all of my wise men and all that, they couldn't do the job. But interpretation, the spirit of the Holy God, the spirit of the Holy God is in you. And Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So he spoke and said to the king, and the king said to him, Belshazzar, do not let the dream of the interpretation trouble you. Belshazzar, Mr. B. I'm going to call him Mr. B, all right? Mr. B says, my lord, this is why he's troubled. This is why he's hesitating. Why is that? My lord, may the dream concern those that hate you. He said, I don't like what I'm about to tell you. That dream is not a good dream for you. I wish it were for your enemies, but it's for you. And that's why he didn't want to tell it. And that, you remember Samuel having the voice of the Lord, Samuel, and he tells him what he's going to do to Eli and Hophni and Phinehas in the Old Testament. And Samuel didn't want to tell him. And finally, on the third time, Eli said, I know God's been talking to you. Tell me the truth in the matter. And he tells him the whole truth in the matter. Sometimes there's truth that you don't want to tell. Sometimes there's truth that not to tell it would be a mistake. Yeah. Here, chapter 4 and verse 20. The tree that you saw, which grew, became strong, height reached the heavens, the leaves, verse 21, lovely, fruit abundant, all of that and that. 22, it is you. It is you, O king. You who have grown and become strong, greatness grown, reached to the heavens, your dominion to the end of the earth, all of that. That's 237. Remember, he didn't get it except God allowed it and would have him. And why does he put these big hitters in place? Why does he allow people to have authority? For God wants to give creation goods to everybody. He wants to feed everybody. That's why he got the sunshine, rain, property, and all the rest of it. He wants to feed everybody, but the purposes of God, not the ultimate overarching purpose. No, or anything connected with that. But the purposes of God are multiple, and he wants to feed everybody in the world. That's what this is all about. It's why he has the birds and the fish and the property and all the rest of it. But it doesn't get to everybody because the powerful, they block him and thwart him. Can God be blocked and thwarted? Yeah, of course he can, but not his overarching purpose. So here's this fellow. He's got all the power. And we're going to see shortly, we're going to see later in this chapter that he tells Nebuchadnezzar, you need to repent. You need to repent of your wickedness, and you need to take care of the poor. We're going to read this in a minute. Chapter 4, verse 24. Here's the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. They'll drive you from man. Your dwelling will be the beasts of the field. They will make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you. It's not 7 years, it's 7 times. It may even be 7 sevens. You see, the number 7 is the completeness. In short, it's going to be on you long enough for you to get the message, till you really hear what is going on. He said in 426, inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. He said, look. Here's this fellow. He knows that the gods, and top of the pantheon right now is Daniel's God. He knows that the gods rule, but he's dead certain that the gods can't rule without him. You know, I mean, okay, so the gods got all the power, but they need me to do the ruling. So here's what happens. In verse 26, we just read that. You're going to have your kingdom. After all of that, running about there, some ambassador comes and says, I would like to speak to the king. And somebody would say, well, if you can catch him, there he is yonder, and here he is galloping after the cattle and all of that, there he munching on the grass, right? And so he says to him in 27, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Here it is, 427 is critically important. O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. When God brought down Sodom and Gomorrah, this is Ezekiel 16, he does mention their depraved activity, but he brings them down because they filled themselves with bread. They were idle. This is Ezekiel 16. They filled themselves with bread. The big hitters, they had all to eat and all they wanted, and they were idle, he says. And they cared nothing for the poor. And God brought them down. Yeah. Listen, God cares about the poor. Cares about the poor, cares about the vulnerable, cares about the voiceless. Bless me. And he says to this guy, hey, you've got all the power in the world. I've given you all this dominion. What do you think I gave it to you for? Well, we're going to find out in a minute what he thought he got it for. Here. Chapter 4 and what? Verse 20. At the end of 12, all this, 28. All that he said came upon the king. So here's Nebuchadnezzar. This is not, it's certainly not common, but there are a number of cases in history where guys, I don't remember reading about a woman, but guys who there's a word for it, and I've forgotten the word, where he becomes an animal, thinks like an animal, and runs out and lives like an animal. Yeah. I read a case long ago that really gutted me, where a family had 2 children, put them in a chicken coop, kept them in there for years.
Feral children and feral animals. Feral children.
Okay.
Feral children.
Feral?
Feral children.
Well, I don't know what that word is, but you know what it is. So what he uses, you can tell me about it later, okay, what feral is, okay? But you know what happened? He turns into an animal. He's not thinking like a man now. He's got a beast's mind in him. And here he goes. And it's just swap later on here in chapter 7. What do you, look, here now he's got a man, he makes him an animal. Over in chapter 7, he's an animal and he's given a man's heart and it doesn't work. Here we go, chapter 4 and verse, all this 28 came upon the king at the end of the 12 months. So 7 times as it worked out here to be 12 months, okay? But that was as long. No, sorry. He got the story. He's 12 months, he's waiting. And then at the end of 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, 4:30, is not this great Babylon, which I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? Daniel gave him the story. He said, this is what's going to happen to you. He forgets all of that. A year later, he's, wow, what a guard, and all of that kind of stuff. And he's rattling on there, the squatty body that he is. And Velikovsky said it's proof that he was a wee squatty body. In any case, here he is. Look at me. Take my picture. All of that kind of stuff. And while the word was still in his mind, 4:31, a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it's spoken, the kingdom is departed from you. Not the territory. The territory stays and all of that. It's a dominion, his exercise of royal dominion. Well, see, that should mean however long it takes. We don't know how long it takes. Let's just say it takes 7 months, and the guy wakens up and realizes, but by that time, his kingdom is run by a guy run about there eating in the field and stuff. All of the big hitters, all of the fellas that wanted a coup, all of the guys that said, see, look, you can't have them. And yet, you see that band was around the route? That was indicate, though you're going to be an idiot and a lunatic and running all over the place, still, you're not going to lose your kingdom. So, God, what are we hearing from that? God can keep the kingdom for him. What does that tell you? God could rule this world with a donkey. God can rule this world with a donkey. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, God can keep the kingdom in some idiot's hands if it suits God's purpose. This man was told, give the poor a break. Do for them. Give them the creation goods that I supply. Give them peace. Give them social list. Give them food. Give them drink. Give them all of that. All of that. That's what you're for, you idiot. In the book of Romans 13, 1-8, he says in chapter 8, you obey these people because they are set up by me as ministers of what's good. Yeah. Isn't that right? Here we go. Oh, let me show you this. You don't have to turn. I'm going to read it from the book of Isaiah 14. 14:4. How the oppressor is seized. The golden city. It's going to be called the golden city in the book of Daniel somewhere. How the oppressor is seized. The golden city seized. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. He who struck the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He who ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and no one hinders. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. Glad he is gone, they're saying. They break forth into singing. Indeed, the cypress trees, you know, the ones that hang all over that looks like a weeping willow type job. They're all singing or whatever, wherever I am there. They break into singing. Verse 7. And then they rejoice over you, even the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodsman has come up against us. This king of Babylon, not Nebuchadnezzar, but a representative. He is the embodiment of this kind of king, you see. And it says 9. I'm reading a New King James, and it says hell. It's Sheol. Sheol from beneath is excited about you to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you. And all the chief ones of the earth that is raised up from their thrones, and all the kings of the nations, they shall all speak and say to you, waking them all up, here he comes, let's give him a big hello, you know. Yeah, right. They said, verse 10, have you also become weak as we? Have you become like us? Your pomp, that's these muscles. That's what he said there a minute ago we were at. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggot is spread under you, and the worms cover you. Oh, that's a great picture. Haven't gone to sleep with that lot. All right. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? You know, and this is where you get premillennialism and all kinds of people going on. The passage tells you who it's talking about in verse 4. All of that, yeah. Go on that way. Here we go. 12 again. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? He was up in heaven. He reigned in heaven. All that sort of stuff he said. Now, how are you cut down to the ground? You who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest side of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yeah. You should be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. And those who see you will gaze at you, considering you, saying, is this the man that made the earth tremble? Who shook kingdoms, who made a world as a wilderness, who destroyed its cities, who did not open the house of his prisoners? All the kings of the nations, all of them sleep in glory, everyone in his own house. But you, that's back up on the earth, you see. They're all sitting in their own houses, sleep in glory, everyone in his own house. But you are cast out of your grave like an abominable branch, like the garment of one who is slain, through with a sword, and go down to the stones like a corpse trodden underfoot, on and on and on and on. That's how it goes. So we're back in the book of Daniel, all right? So what you heard in chapter 14 is what you hear in the book of Daniel here in chapter 4. And he gave him the story. This is what's going to happen to you if you don't straighten up, you don't take care of the poor, if you don't take care of the vulnerable and all the rest of it, God's going to bring you down. Well, he heard all of that, but still, And so look at this place I made. Sure, look at that. 28-inch biceps and the whole thing. See? And it happened. So chapter 4 and verse
32.
32 now. Okay, thank you. They'll drive you out from among the men and all of that. Now 33, that very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men. It grass like an oxen. His body was wet with the dew of head, until his hair was grown like eagle's feathers and nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, 34, at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven. My understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and all that he said before there. Verse 36, at the same time, my reason returned to me. For the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles resorted to me. I was restored to my kingdom. An excellent majesty was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, extol, and honor the King of heaven, and whose works are truth, and his ways are justice. And those who walk in pride, he is able to bring down. Okay, thank you. So that's chapter 4. What's all this about? Why is he running about there like a donkey or an ox? Why is all of that happening to him? He explicitly says, so that you get the message. But we weren't there when that was happening. But we have a record of it. And here it is. And who is this speaking to now? Who is this? What? Who's this for? Well, there's a great story told, had to do with 6th century before Jesus Christ. Yeah. But what? What's the good of all these stories back there if they have nothing to tell us? And every president, every prime minister, every head of the Politburo, every conqueror, everybody on and on and on, all of those people, all the multinationalists who sit in their big fancy this, that, and the other, while people are starving, freezing, naked, homeless, all of that. While the West, they burned wheat, poured out milk that wasn't bought because there weren't enough people. All of that could have given it to the world, but couldn't give it to the world because it set up an economy arrangement that would have hurt their own nation. We've done it. And God is saying I don't care what government it is. I don't care who's the governor. Don't care where it's at. God is speaking to the world today from this place in the book of Daniel. Yeah. And so I'm not talking about Mr. Biden or anybody else right now. I'm talking about someone who gets up in front of people and says, I'm your savior. I can take care of all of this. Don't believe a word of it. Don't believe a word of it. Well, that's chapter. Well, anyway, his kingdom, they all come back to him. What would normally have happened, you would have thought, is that it happened when Sennacherib came to Jerusalem in Ezekiel 37. He went back home, and while he was gone, trouble, and they killed him. And coups went on all the time. And earlier in the book of Kings, God talks about the northern kingdom. There wasn't a king who went on that throne. Well, maybe more than one, but there wasn't a king who went on that throne in the north. That wasn't murder. It was coup here, coup there. Everybody came and killed every king who was on them. This was how they did it. Yeah, they're doing it in Africa. They're doing it everywhere. Bless me. What do you mean? Just there, everywhere. Chapter 5, really, really quick, just to introduce it, and then I'll stop. Okay. Belshazzar This is chapter 5. Belshazzar, there are some debates about who his family is. He is the adopted son, probably, of a fellow called Nabonidus. Nabonidus is the last of the Babylonian kings. Nabonidus was an archaeologist. He was a world traveler. And he really liked the business, and he left Belshazzar on more than one occasion. Look after things for me. I got something to do. And he went out there traveling the world and loving the whole thing. He was the last of the kings, yes? Now, this fella here is acting regent for him. He apparently also, he was married to one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters, Necritus. But it doesn't make any difference. Forget all of that. Just get this, that this is Belshazzar. Bel, the major god. Different names for different gods at different times. Marduk became the name later, but he used to be called Bel. He used to be called Nebo. All that stuff goes on. You can't trust them more than 10 minutes to know which god they're talking about. But you don't care about that. You shouldn't care about it either. I used to know all those names. I can't remember anything unless I'm reading it. Chapter 5, the king made a great feast. 1,000 of his lords drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While they tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave command to bring in the gold, silver vessels, and that his father Nebuchadnezzar. He called Nebuchadnezzar his father. It's usual, not at all common, and not uncommon for the fellow to call your authority, the man above you, and all of that, your father. That's why Elisha will call Elijah his father. That kind of thing is so common. That Nebuchadnezzar had brought from Jerusalem. And he's doing all of that with all the lords, wives, concubines, that they might drink from them. He brought all these cups of the lords in. And then they brought the gold vessels, verse 3, that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. The king and the lords, his wives, concubines drank from them. They drank wine, praise the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, stone, government, this, that, and the other. They praised all kinds of gods, for pity's sake. We've got more gods than we can count this very day. And we even worship ourselves, bless me. Romans 1:18-32. Get that. All right. Here, I'm nearly done. All that was in Jerusalem, and then they praised the gods and all of the rest of it. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall. That's a lot of detail, isn't it? Of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote, the fingers. Can you imagine that? Wouldn't that be spooky enough? Ooh, you'll have a dream after that, won't you? The hand wrote, the king's countenance was changed, thoughts were troubled, so that the joints of his hips were loosed and his knees knocked against one another. Here's this king. Here's 1,000 of his lords. Here's all the women just adoring him and all of that kind of thing. And he takes a look around while he's putting the booze up to his throat. And here's these fingers writing on the wall. And all of a sudden, his knees are knocking and he can hardly stand up. What a lord, eh? What a king. Check that, boy. Oh, this is a great piece of scripture. Yeah, it is. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about somebody, he's up and he's been voted in and all of that. He's thrown the bits and pieces, and then he sees what he hasn't heard it, to govern, and all of a sudden he's all, I don't know with all that. Yeah, idiot. Some idiot. I'm not talking about anybody. Here we are. And verse 7, the king cried aloud, bring the astrologers called in, soothsayers. He spoke and said, verse 7, I want to know whoever reads this is going to get clothed with purple and all of that kind of stuff. Verse 8, all the king's wise men came. They couldn't read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Well, it's not that they couldn't make the words out. They couldn't get it. What does that mean? For pity's sake. And verse 9, The king Belshazzar was greatly troubled. His countenance changed. The lords were astonished. The queen, because of the words of the king and all that, she told him, O king, verse 10, middle, O king, live forever. Don't let your thoughts trouble you or let your countenance change. There's a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God, and in the days of your father, and he tells him about the Nebuchadnezzar thing and that. Verse 12, inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge and understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles and explaining enigmas were found in Daniel, get him. Daniel was brought in before the king. The king says to Daniel, are you that Daniel, one of the captives, Judah and that? And 14, I've heard of you. Well, why did they get him early? He was too busy. He's probably too busy praying. With the window open, you can't disturb while he's praying. I have heard of you. The Spirit of God is in you in that light and understanding and excellent wisdom. Now, the wise men, they couldn't do the job. They couldn't make it known unto me. Verse 16, I've heard of you that you can give interpretation. Now, if you can read the writing, make known to me the interpretation. You'll be clothed with purple, have a chain of gold around your neck, third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel said, let your gifts be for yourself. Ooh. Give your rewards to another. You away?
Yeah, I'm away, Daddy.
All right, my love. God bless.
It's 50 minutes.
He said, give him to all of that, but I'll tell you it anyway. And he tells him, write down 9. Let me jump to 25. Mene, tekel, upharsin. The first two words are weighing and numbering. You know how they would number bits of silver and bits of gold and that. Sometimes they didn't do it. Today you do it with coins as well. You just get a bunch of them and you put them all together and you weigh them. So he's talking about weighing and numbering, checking what you're worth. And then upharsin. Yeah, there's a big debate about it, but the word Persia is in the word. It's some root. I don't know what the cat hair is talking about. But he said, Mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the word of interpretation. God has numbered your kingdom, finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. There's what? Well, upharsin's not right. The word, never mind. He's just told us what it's about. He said, your kingdom is divided. Belshazzar gave the command, give them all the stuff anyway. That night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom. That's the end of chapter 5. That Darius the Mede, nobody knows who he is, but he's probably a fellow called Gubaru. All right.